When I was 17, I left Ireland for the first time. It was the summer just after my Leaving Cert. It was a summer that was full of potential and hope. The hope for me was that it'd be a summer where I'd finally have a girlfriend, where I'd finally get a shift. Maybe even get a little bit more than that if I was lucky. Up until that point, I'd been very unlucky. And so my hope was that I would stay in Ireland and have a summer of exploring my own sexuality. But as it turned out, I actually ended up moving to Switzerland that summer and working in a hotel on the top of a mountain. And that set in motion a lifetime of traveling and living in other places. And I often wonder what would have happened to me if I'd never left. What would have happened if I'd stayed in Ireland that summer and stayed in silence and not traveled? One, I'd probably not have learned to speak other languages that I speak now. Two, I probably wouldn't have learned how to drive on the other side of the road. And three, and this I'm not certain of, but I wouldn't put it past me, I might still be a virgin to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Bugally, Colleeny, welcome to Healing from Irishness. This episode is all about relationships. Hello everyone, it's Connor here again. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Just poured myself a big mug of sleepy time tea. And if I've timed this to perfection, it'll kick in just at the end of this podcast and I can have a really nice nap. What I want to talk about today is how we are when we're in love, how we are when we're in relationships. Because, as you might have suspected, we're not like everybody else. The Irish in love are a little bit different. And in this episode, I want to talk about how we are a little bit different. And the first thing that I just want to say off the top is that so many of us don't get to experience love in this lifetime. So many Irish people live a life and never really experienced love. And that's tragic. Because one of the nicest things to experience here on earth, while alive, is to experience love. It truly is a beautiful thing to feel that you are being completely yourself. You're not abandoning, you're not people pleasing, you're not masking. You are being 100% unashamedly bad breath, farts in the bed, all of it, and you're still being loved. And the reason so few of us actually experience this love is again coming back to our good old friend shame. So when we start off, shame, again, just a gentle reminder, it's the belief that there is something wrong with you. So when you start off with shame, you're kind of always just at the mercy of any love available, any affection available. You'll kind of just say yes to the crumbs. But when you say yes to the crumbs, you don't really get to experience love because you're so afraid of the crumbs being taken away from you that you're never really yourself. And this is where I want to talk about our avoidance. You know, when they talk about the different kind of relationship attachments, insecure, mixed and avoidant, I feel that most Irish people are avoidants. I think we're all actually kind of scared of being in love. We're scared of really feeling real love. We would rather just have some sort of platonic buddy-buddy, brother-sister partnership type thing. Great, let's... And so a lot of Irish relationships are places where there's no intimacy. There's no sex going on. There's a couple of people who split the bills together and maybe even are raising kids together, but they're not really intimate and they're not really connecting. And that's fine, because in that sort of a situation, You don't actually have to touch on real love. You don't have to fully show up as you are. It's kind of just a companionship. You're just walking each other along, but you're missing out on the real love that's available. And the reason that we stay in this avoiding places is because we're just so scared. We're so scared of judgment. We're so scared of not being received. I know myself, like when I look at kind of my partner now is not Irish. I've very rarely been in relationships with Irish people. Um, and even when I was young, you know, I started late. I never really had girls liking me when I was a kid. As a teenager, do you know what I mean? I didn't really, I think, have my first girlfriend or so till I was in my 20s. But I always avoided Irish girls and Irish women because I felt too scared. It was too vulnerable. The potential for being judged, my fear of being weak, my fear of experiencing cruelty was just too high, that it was just so much easier for me to float into a relationship with someone who didn't speak great English and had no idea of my background and who couldn't look me in the eye and go, Connor Crichton, I know exactly who you are. I was avoiding that. Many of us, many Irish people, we avoid. We avoid the real love because it's just so scary. And the reason it's just so scary and the thing that keeps us away from love is our fear of vulnerability. It is so hard for us to be vulnerable. You know, there's a kind of, I can remember, and this happens with our friends too. It happens in our families. Do you know, especially us men. I remember one night going to work when I worked in the kitchen in Dublin, the nightclub, and going to work with my friend Paddy Brennan. And I'd just broken up with a girlfriend like an hour before, a girlfriend of a year or something, and was walking into work with him. We were just chit chatting, and I said, "Oh, I just broke up with Kira," and he was like, "Yeah, cool. So, which bar do you want to work at tonight?" Do you know what I mean? There was no place for how are you feeling, what's going on. You know, there wasn't really that option. We were often the generation that I grew up in, we didn't take care of each other like that. Like most of the time, the feelings and vulnerability only really emerged when you were quite drunk in the early hours of the morning. So connecting with this is always so hard. If you want real love, you have to be able to connect with vulnerability. If you want real love, you have to be able to say what you feel, what you expect. And this vulnerability is so difficult for us Irish people. At one level, it's difficult um, with our friends, but at another level, at an intergenderal level, at an intersexual level, it's even more difficult because we grow up so separate. I can remember being about 10 years of age, maybe even younger, down in Salins, and playing football at the front of the community centre with Lisa Kavanagh. And another boy from my school seeing me. And the next day, all the boys surrounded me and saying, Connor, you play football with girls? And not knowing that this was a bad thing, I sort of replied, yeah, I do. And they all look at me and go, no, you're not supposed to play football with girls. And so when Lisa Kavanagh came around to play football the next day, I had to say, I can't play football with you anymore. And that was the end of that. I was hardly going to go against the consensus of the boys in my class. And you know, it was only when I moved away and lived in places like Italy and Spain and so on and so forth, that I kind of began to see how kids here grow up different to us. Do you know? They hug each other. They kind of sit side by side. Boys and the girls are mixing. Something about our school system here in Ireland created just like this huge wedge of separation, which meant that the only time you ever approached a girl was in a kind of with an intention of trying to shift them, or there was some sort of sexual direction. You know, this friendship, this gentle friendship that can emerge between boys and girls. It just wasn't really available to us. Your friends were your boys, and girls were then the object, the thing that you tried to attract. And I think it worked in the opposite way too. Girls were the same. They kind of looked on boys as like what you might shift, what you might kind of talk to at the disco. But their friends were girls. And so we missed out. We missed out on this exchange of information and end up becoming so separate from each other. We live in opposite worlds. I think in my late 30s, for a little while, I joined a cult. Not really, not like a cult that you'd see on TV. Like, nobody was drinking poison and there was no sex really going on. But it was a group of people who all lived in a home together and had a kind of a shared spiritual vision. And that shared spiritual vision involved everyone trying to be as authentic and expressive as possible. So it meant there was a lot of screaming went on in the house. There was a lot of crying. If you were going to make yourself a cup of coffee in the morning and you said, "How are you?" there was a good chance that the person would respond, and that would take up a whole hour of them responding about how they are. So you kind of learned not to ask someone how they were feeling unless you had an hour free to really listen to them. But something that happened in this house was very interesting. That changed me a lot, in that because everyone was going around crying all the time and screaming at each other, there was a lot of making up going on. So you'd hug each other. But it wasn't like a hug where you just pat each other on the back. You'd have a hug and you'd sit in a chair and you'd hug and you'd hold each other. And it was platonic. The intention behind these hugs was just to feel connection with another person, heart to heart. It didn't matter that it was male, female, male, male. It was just, we're going to connect. We're going to hold each other. I'm going to give you an embrace. You've been crying. I'm going to hold you in a way that maybe a mother would hold a child. And for me, this brought up so much confusion, sexual confusion. I noticed like my head going into like rapid analysis. Like, what does this mean? What's behind this? Am I supposed to like lob the gob here? Like, what's going to happen? Is my gob going to be lobbed? There was so much confusion in me as I learned to touch people platonically. We don't learn to touch each other platonically. Even my dad, my parents, it took so long to like feel comfortable hugging them. So many of us probably grow up not ever hugging our parents, not ever feeling comfortable in a hug with our parents, the people who love us, the people who made us, the people who we are made of. And so this separation, it makes things so tricky for us. It makes things so tricky for us when we meet each other. And I know myself, when I first started to, I was about to say date, but like in my 20s in Ireland, it wasn't dating. It was being hammered and talking to someone and then maybe going home with them. And then maybe going home with them another couple of times. There wasn't this idea of a date. I certainly don't remember ever taking someone out for a meal back then. But what happened is like my encounters with other women, it always felt like, meeting something strange. There was so much separation. Even in friends group, there's separations, like meeting another woman, what's happening? And as a result, I was never myself. I was always putting on a performance. I was like, well, what would this person like me to be? This is the big problem for Irish people in relationships, because we are so good at masking. Remember, I've talked as well about this is how we are liked. Initially, we are liked because we're so fake. We're such good performers. We're so able to mask. We're so able to people please. And we do this to such great effect in our relationships. But what that masking means, what that people pleasing means, is that you're abandoning yourself over and over again. I remember like some of my first sexual encounters. I had nothing to do with my pleasure whatsoever. My pleasure was the last thing on my mind. Everything on my mind, everything that was sort of to the front of my mind was, is this person having a good experience? Do they like me? Are they impressed by me? My shame was so rife that everything, all those first tender sexual experiences that I have, experiences that could have been fun with a little bit of vulnerability, with a little bit of Jesus. I don't know a fucking clue what I'm doing. Do you know what you're doing? How can we stumble our way through this without feeding blame or shame or obligation? All of those experiences were high anxiety moments of intense pressure. I felt like I was really kind of at an interview. And the interview was like the value and worth that I bring to life. I think then it was only the first few times then that when I kind of mixed drugs and sex that I began to actually get out of my head and into my body and enjoy it. But I can remember so many of those early experiences just being stressful and exhausting and so difficult. The fear of being liked, the fear of being accepted, and the worry of not being liked and not being accepted. You know, I often dream of being transported back into some of those early bedrooms, some of the places where I brought people home or I was brought home to around Ranelagh, Rapmines and the North Circular Road and places like that. And just been beside myself, even holding my hand, whispering in my ear and going, Connor, it's all right. Don't worry. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You don't have to be anything you're not ready to be. You can just enjoy this. You can ask for your needs. For Irish people, it's so difficult to ask for our needs in relationships. This creates so much fear in us. And so we never ask for our needs. We never ask for what we want. You have to have a sense of deserving in you to ask for your need or to have your wants met. And because we have such a high tolerance for misery, we can be very fine with bad relationships. We're used to not being happy. I often feel when I work with clients that the real test of the values that they have for themselves is the quality of their relationships. Are they getting their needs met? Are they receiving what they want to receive? Are they vulnerably opening up to their partner or partners and saying, this is what I want. Can you do it for me? Can you give it to me? I feel I deserve it. And that's it. You know, we have this sense where we put quantity over quality. There's a real kind of virtue in longevity in Ireland and amongst Irish people. You know, we've been together for 10 years. We've been together for 20 years. We've eked out this relationship for so long, but have you actually felt love? Have you really, really began to touch each other's hearts? Have you felt your heart has been cradled? Because for so many of us, that's not the case. For so many of us, we imagine that the whole purpose of a relationship is to stick together, when it's not. A relationship is a playground. And maybe you stick together, maybe you change, but you're there to have an experience. It's not a situation where you work for like a council job that you do for 40 years and then you get a pension at the back of it. We know your relationship, yes, historically our relationships were things that we held on to forever because there was no other chance. But that history doesn't mean it was right. You know, when you start to look at the old Brehon laws that govern Ireland before English law became the predominant law, divorce was very easy. It was very simple. Women could get divorced, men could get divorced. There wasn't really a mismatch. You took all your money back with you. You know, you got the divorce. The woman was like, okay, I'm keeping my dowry. You could get divorced for many reasons, even trivial, impotence. He can't get it up anymore, so I'm divorcing him. It was okay, less frowned upon, less shame. But the sense that we have to stick through things, that you can't give up. But you know what happens when you don't give up on a relationship that's miserable? You give up on yourself. You suffer. In order to really fall in love and to receive love, we have to get rid of this notion of suffering. We have to get rid of this expectation that we will suffer. And in order to do that, we need a combination of bravery and vulnerability. When I do workshops, a lot of the time at the start of a workshop, just to get trust, to gather trust and to connect us all together, I will ask, I'll say, let's go around, can everyone tell me something that happened in their childhood that still affects them today? And this can be a range, you might say, oh, I ate some bad, gone off mayonnaise, and still to this day I can't even look at mayonnaise without going green in the face. Or someone might say, I didn't bond fully with my mother, and so I can never trust anybody. And what I notice when I'm working with Irish people is we are just fucking dying to share our vulnerability. We're just dying to encounter a safe space where we can really go, whew, this is what happened to me and this is the effect and this is where I am now. And our relationships don't always feel like safe spaces. We don't look for safety because we're ready to just accept the crumbs. We have this belief, and the belief is something that we've inherited from our parents and our grandparents, that love is hard to find. It's not true. Love is not hard to find. When you become a creature of love, when you become a creator of love, when you love yourself, when you show up for yourself, when you follow your dreams, when you change that self-talk to just accept your own brilliance, to love your moves, to love your body, to love every part of you, you realize that love's not scarce at all. It's like falling out of the fucking trees. And you can do this. It's not hard. But when you have the belief that love is scarce, then you accept anything that comes your way. This is what happened. This is most of the homes that we grew up into were homes where there wasn't love. And so what happens is that we just repeat those patterns. I speak to people every day. I notice this myself. My parents were very, very codependent. There was a lot of manipulation going on in the background of the relationship. And I could see this as a kid at the table. You could see this is incoherent. Here's someone trying to make someone feel guilty. Here's someone acting like a child. Here's like my dad acting like a child, so my mom would be the parent. Here's my mom withholding love, so my dad is more desperate. You could see it back and forth, the codependency, the power game. It wasn't love. But in so many of my relationships, I've repeated that exact same game. And the reason I've done that is because I didn't know there was any better. For most of you listening out there now, you might not know there is better. You see, this is the thing that happens to us when we don't begin to examine. When we don't begin to examine what's going on at a subconscious level, life will just happen and we consider it fate. I used to think it was fate that so many of my partners had alcohol problems. My dad was an alcoholic too. Something like I was attracted to the smell of alcohol on someone's breath in the morning, because that was my recollection of my dad going in to bring him a cup of tea in the morning and the stink of booze off his breath. And that for me was love. So it became very natural for me to then be attracted to people who stank of booze in the morning too. It was like my familiar role. But once you become aware of the role you're playing, then the option emerges, and the option is, can you imagine something different? And this is where vulnerability comes in. And the vulnerability is, I am going to try and feel real love. I will be loved or die trying. I will love myself or die trying. That's the vulnerability. I will risk being on my own, because being on my own is so much better than not being loved. To understand love for Irish people, you have to also understand our loneliness. In a future episode, I'm going to talk about our loneliness. There's such a deep loneliness at the core of us all. We're so isolated in our hearts. It's also because we don't love ourselves, and it's connected to our history, and it's the reason that we accept the crumbs. When you can face loneliness, and I'm going to talk more about this in more depth and more length in the future, but when you can face loneliness and accept that being alone and loving yourself is a much better state of affairs than being lonely and surrounded by people, then that also makes love easier. It makes love so much easier. You know, I really feel that more than most, Irish people deserve to know what real love is. They deserve to really just be accepted from themselves and learn that they are beautiful and magical. I wrote an article for Vice magazine back when I used to be a journalist a long time ago. And it was quite biographical. And that article was called Why You Need to Get Out of Your Shitty Little Town This Summer. And it was a rallying cry to anyone who was growing up a weirdo in a little village, who was pigeonholed already at a young age. And the rallying call was, get out, go roam the world. Because the further you get from your shitty little village, the more your weirdness, the things that will cause separation and isolation and loneliness in you, the more those things will be cherished. Because this was my experience, you know, I was growing up in Salons, and a place where we all know these places, you know, it's where like someone gets a nickname age 10 and they still have that nickname age 50. You don't escape. There's no opportunity for growth. There's no beginner's mind. You are locked in. And I was locked in, you know, as a 17-year-old who had never kissed anyone, never had a girlfriend. Had to paraphrase Kevin Barry, I had teeth like a desecrated graveyard, milky white skin, ginger curls that I always kept under a beanie. And as I moved away, as I got further away and traveled, I suddenly realized that people found me attractive. People liked my accent. They liked how I spoke. They liked my runaway curls. They thought my pale skin was fascinating. I looked like some dead body that was walking around. And all of this just helped me to find love for myself, helped me to feel sexy in myself. Do you know how good it is to just feel sexy in yourself, to be in your body and go, I love this body and I love how it feels and no one can take that away from me. And the further I got away from the bullying, the cruelty, the lack of opportunities that I knew, the more confident I became and the more magnetic I became. And it really did so much healing for me. And this is the thing, you know, we're not the most complimentary of people. We find it hard to dance sometimes. We find it hard to touch each other. We find it hard to be vulnerable. We find it hard to be open. We'd rather be cruel in a fun way. We'd rather take the piss. Because this vulnerability, this raw sense that I actually want real love, this very, very human desire that can set you apart from everybody and raise your expectations, raise your hopes. It's terrifying. We're so terrified of raising our hopes. We're so terrified of getting excited about things. You know, I remember as a kid growing up, we'd start to get excited about Christmas or birthdays. And the warning that always came down for us was, don't get too excited now or you won't be, in case you get disappointed. Like, temper your excitement, temper your hope, temper your anticipation because you might get disappointed. And that is a message that we carry on into love. Love is not really a place where I think you should ever limit your excitement or your hope, because love is your birthright and love is the most incredible thing you can experience in this lifetime. And this love is the relationship that you develop in yourself, this relationship, this decision, this intention to be with yourself, to stick with yourself, to be 100% yourself, to not abandon who you are for anyone else. And then from that place, the love that you call in, the love that can really split you open, is available to you. And we deserve that. We really do. I hope it comes your way. I hope you start to make moves to create it in yourself, knowing that the more you can be a being of love, the more love you will encounter. Love is infinite. It's all around us. At the risk of being cheesy, it's all that really matters in the end. And you create the love that you encounter. So that's it. Thank you. Loads of love. Take care of yourself. I have a community called Patreon. On Patreon. It's not called Patreon. It's on Patreon. You can join it. We dive into much deeper spiritual themes there. I also have a course called Healing from Irishness. And I do one-on-one coaching sessions as well. So if you are having issues attracting love, if you're having a difficult time in relationships, call me. I can be good. That's it. Love yourself. Thanks for listening. Slán. Bye-bye.